Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to another movie review. Today, we're going to be reviewing The Flash. Before we get into the movie review, as usual, just want to give you guys a spoiler warning. I have a hard time doing these reviews without spoiling, so I want to let you know ahead of time. If you know anything about The Flash movie, there is a ton of controversy around it, mainly around the actor Ezra Miller. But then besides that, it was delayed and there were a ton of reshoots and edits and cuts to the film, and it had been delayed for a long time. It's like been in production for like very long. Like I remember hearing about it like probably 3 years ago, so I was like very excited for it. I had a lot of anticipation, and then all this stuff happened with Ezra Miller. I won't go into that here. If you know about it, I mean, it's been beat to death. I feel like most people know about it if you're seeing the Flash movie. But I wanted to put that aside and try to still enjoy the movie and hope that he would do a great job. Obviously it doesn't excuse what he's done in real life, but I can still enjoy a performance, even if the real actor is a bit of a mess in real life. And let me just say, boy did I enjoy the movie. I honestly had like a good amount of expectations for this movie. I am a fan of the DCEU, despite all of its problems, and I do like the characters set up by Snyder. Even though his vision for the universe is a little flawed, I do enjoy the actors he casted and like the tone and just overall feeling of his DC universe. And then obviously it's gotten a little off the rails since Snyder left, but they've kept that universe going despite its problems. And this movie is technically the conclusion to that old DC universe, and then the new one is starting with James Gunn soon. Although there is a new Aquaman movie still coming out in the winter, so people don't know if that's connected to the old DC movies or in the new DCU with Gunn, as well as Blue Beetle. But just assuming that this is the last DCEU film, I think it wrapped things up very well, and it was almost like a nice send-off to all the fans of those movies, and a very nice way to usher in the new films. So I normally like to kind of run through the plot in a chronological order as I review these movies, just so I can kind of like paint a picture of what happens in the movie. Then I point out things I liked and didn't like about it. And also I feel like that helps if you don't plan on seeing the movie. I'm basically giving you a plot summary for it. So the basic plot of this movie, it follows a Flashpoint storyline. There's been movies and comics that it's based off of. So basically, the Flash is a member of the Justice League that is like set up already as he's been in the Justice League movie. So same universe, or it's assumed. And he kind of just gets treated like the janitor, as he says, of the Justice League, just kind of cleaning up their messes. And the movie opens up with a really great chase scene with Batman, played by Ben Affleck. And Alfred and Batman are basically directing Flash to help save the hospital that's collapsing as he chases after a villain with a virus that could like kill the whole city if they get away. And I'm a huge fan of Affleck. I don't think he's the best Batman, but I love him a lot. I just think he looks really cool in the part. I liked him. I mean, I don't care what people say, I really liked him as Batman. And it was really cool to see him get his last moment in this movie, even though it was pretty short. The only complaint I had about this scene was that I wish it was more of a like recognizable villain that Batman was chasing after. It would have been cool to see like a very like comic-y, campy character show up in this fight scene. They just kind of picked a random goon, which I'm not a huge fan of in these comic movies where they just have random henchmen. It's like just pick some cool comic character that people would know, and just kind of adds a little spice to the movie. And then also I want to say, I'm not a huge fan of car scenes, like car chases in movies, but this one was really interesting and it was a good way to start the movie. So Batman's chasing after the villains while Flash is trying to prevent the hospital from collapsing, and he catches all these babies that fall from the top of the building as it's falling. This is shown in slow-mo, so it kind of gives you like Flash's point of view as he's really fast, but time seems to slow down around him. And this scene, despite the CGI just being like really bad in my opinion, I still liked it, and I think it was comical, which like is fine coming from a comic book movie. It was definitely like the uncanny CGI where it was like not just horrible, but also like not good enough where it looked realistic, but it was goofy and it was just a fun scene. And the way they showed it was really cool, and the way Flash saved them was also really cool. and I think it kind of showed Flash's personality. Like I said, despite Ezra Miller being a weird guy in real life and a bad guy in real life, he has a lot of charisma as an actor and really makes Barry a funny, likable guy, and I feel like his personality kind of shows up in this scene and later on throughout the movie. So basically Flash is dealing with like being like the third wheel, or kind of just the team that the Justice League hands like petty side missions to. And then also, before we move on, Wonder Woman shows up, and it was cool to have her show up, maybe make her last cameo. She showed up in Shazam and then this one, and it wouldn't be a Wonder Woman cameo if her theme song didn't play. I just love how dramatic and just it's always hilarious when her theme song plays when she shows up. So besides his problems with the Justice League, Flash's biggest conflict in this movie is dealing with the loss of his mother, and they follow the storyline from the comics and the Flashpoint movies. Basically, his mom died, and the dad comes home, and they suspect that the dad did it, and he's in jail, and he was arrested for the murder of his wife and Barry's mom, even though he didn't do it. So Flash has a lot to deal with. He basically lost two parents in the same night. His mom died, and his dad went to jail falsely. And that is basically what sets up the main conflict of the movie. Flash has to deal with this loss, and while he's like reminiscing on the past, he starts to run through the Speed Force, and he accidentally goes back in time. And this is where we kind of get a first look at the Speed Force. It's definitely an interesting concept, the way they portrayed it, but I think they did a solid job. The CGI is not as flawless as it was in the Justice League and the Snyder Cut. Obviously, a lot of money went into that, and they had to get that right. It was like a lot of detail put into the Flash entering the Speed Force in the Justice League. But with this one, you could tell they didn't have all the budget. I think they were trying to save money because they knew they were going to lose money on this film. But despite that, I think the overall design of the Speed Force and at least the goal they were going for, like, you could see the vision. It just wasn't executed the best. But after Barry goes through the Speed Force and realizes he can time travel, he tells Batman about it, and Batman has a really great speech. Another reason why I love Ben Affleck as Batman. Just really heartfelt speech about how maybe you're not supposed to go back in time and change those scars, as it made him the hero he is. But Flash doesn't want to accept this, and he decides that he can go back in time and try to stop his mom from ever being killed and go back to a time period where he could live with her. But as it never works out with movies dealing with time travel, he ends up in a universe where he finds himself, but 18 years old, so his mom is still alive, but Barry is 18 and doesn't have his powers. So in order to fix this, the Barry from the main timeline has to give the younger Barry his powers. So this was one thing I thought the movie did really well. You have two Barrys played by the same actor at the same time. One is 18 and one is the older modern day Barry. And the CGI for having them on the same screen at the same time was just impeccable. I'm not 100% sure, but I heard that it was a body double for the younger Ezra, and then the older Ezra was played by, or the older Barry was played by Ezra, and then they CGI'd his younger face onto the younger Barry. So the fact that that was so flawless and most people didn't even notice was done really well. And I just thought the chemistry between himself with the younger version of himself was great. The younger Barry was really funny, and just like having a lighthearted Barry in there was great. But then the older Barry I thought was really well done, because after he loses his powers and in an attempt to give his younger self the powers, he immediately does the right thing and just teaches the younger Barry how to do it, because obviously he's been through it, so he knows how to help himself. And I liked how helpful he was even when he didn't have powers. Normally when superheroes lose their powers in the movies, you're just waiting for them to get them back because they're boring without them. But he was acted really well and written very solid, so that it was still enjoyable to see. So once the younger Barry has his powers, the older Barry helps them find the Batman of their universe that basically was created because of Barry's mistake of going in the past. And this is where we meet Michael Keaton, the OG Batman from the 90s. I always loved Michael Keaton, so it's really cool to have him such a big part of this movie. And I know people aren't fans of the cameos in these multiverse movies, but honestly I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was like it was really cool to see him come back. And my dad always loved Michael Keaton, so it was nice nostalgia having him back. And I think he fit the role really well of an older, beaten up Batman. But I liked how, despite him being like retired, once he realized that the Flashes needed him, he stepped back in right away and was basically classic Batman. And it was really cool that they were able to give him a modern touch, because his fight scenes were like really great, and I loved how agile he was, and they made his suit like more updated, and he was able to move around, and he was a total beast. Like, he was mowing down all the villains, and he just took care of business, and it was so epic to see him on. And like his whole Batcave reveal was amazing, and I loved the OG Batman theme by Danny Elfman that played. I feel like that's one thing that's been missing from these superhero movies lately, is the iconic superhero themes. And obviously it's a little bit cheating because they're just using an old theme that already exists, but having that in there just really added to the moment of seeing old Batman back. I forgot to mention, the reason they're looking for the Batman in this universe is that this is when Zod attacks Earth from the Man of Steel movie. So basically they're retreading kind of plots from the Snyderverse, old DCEU. So it's cool to kind of like look back and see how it played out in a different alternate timeline. And like I mentioned, Batman doesn't want to help at first, but then when he realizes it's going to be a problem, he steps in to help, and that's when they go looking for the Superman of their Earth. But what they don't realize is it's not actually Kal-El, Clark Kent Superman, it's his cousin, Kara, and they find her, she's emaciated, she's being held captive by Russians, and since her power comes from the sun, she hasn't had a time to like absorb the rays and become powerful, so she's basically just like emaciated and useless and powerless. But the Flashes and Batman save her, and then she gets out in the sunlight, has a really epic moment where she gets her powers and just mows down all the soldiers. I think this fighting scene looked a little wonky. It was definitely interesting to see like Superman moves and movements, but it's like this skinny girl that like clearly can't defeat these villains if it were real life, but it's a superhero movie, so who cares. But besides that, like the CGI was a little off and just the movements were kind of weird. I still liked it. Like, it was a really cool epic fight scene, and it just, yeah, I mean, it had like an uncanny look, the movement, and just like the, not like the irony, but like the ridiculousness of the fight. But it was still really cool to see a Superman just go to town and destroy the villains. And so now they have to convince Kara to help the humans from Zod attacking, and she's reluctant at first, just like Superman was in Man of Steel. Obviously he has a whole movie to develop and kind of become part of Earth and want to actually defend him, whereas her arc was a little rushed because it's a Flash movie. But one thing I was going to say is it basically just became a Justice League movie. They were just kind of rehashing all these old movies in the Justice League storyline. And then also it's like a multiverse movie, but I mean that's kind of a given with Flash as he deals with time travel. I wasn't against that as much as a lot of people are. Like, I mean, Flash has some cool solo villains, but I think it was fine that it was such a grand scale that he was dealing with. But basically, Kara gets convinced to help protect Earth from Zod, as she finds out that Zod is basically the one that killed Clark as an infant, so she gets totally pissed. And they're really taking care of the army. But then they get defeated. Batman goes down flying into the ship, and Kara gets stabbed by Zod. But then the Flashes realize that they can just go back in time and reset it. But what they find out is that no matter what they do, they can't change the outcome of that fight. It's meant to happen. Batman's meant to die, and Kara's meant to die as well. So they have to solve the problem another way. And as I mentioned, Batman dies. This was a very like heartfelt, impactful moment where Flash says, "Sorry, I couldn't bring you back." Basically, like all his attempts, he couldn't bring him back by going back in time. And then Michael Keaton goes, "You already did bring me back," and that was just, it hit really hard. I really loved that. It was a great moment in the movie. I mean, because it was like cool. He came back in real life to play Batman, and they kind of paralleled that in the movie. When both Flashes realize they can't change the past, they can't save this timeline. The older Flash like tries to put an end to it, but the younger Flash wants to keep trying. He's like, "Give me one more chance. I'm gonna change it." And he's going through all these timelines, but it doesn't change no matter how much he does. No matter what he does, he keeps going back in time. Kara always dies, and Batman always dies, and Zod wins. And his timeline's just not meant to be because of the older Barry, who basically caused that Earth to exist. And it's a tough decision because the older Barry has to basically let the younger version of himself die as they become great friends. And obviously seeing like another version of yourself die isn't like, it's sad. But the younger Barry keeps trying, and this is where you kind of get the first glimpse at Dark Flash, who appeared at times throughout the movie. This is where you get the reveal that the dark evil Flash is actually just the younger Barry, but in the future he just kept trying and trying and trying, and it never worked. He couldn't change the outcome, and it corrupted him. So the older Barry, well, our Barry, the main timeline Barry, has to let his younger self go and let him die so that it prevents the evil Barry in the future from ever existing. And basically this means that Barry can't bring his mom back. No matter what he does, he can't change the past and the moment in his life that is like meant to be. No matter what, his mom has to die. And you get a really emotional scene. I was really surprised by the like depth of this movie, the depth it had, and the like just the heartfelt moments they put in. They were able to really like strike a chord. So we get Barry's last look at his mom before he has to let her go, and this is in the grocery store. Basically what causes her to die is she forgets the tomato sauce, and Barry has to just let her, he has to watch it happen and let her go. And you get this sad moment where the older Barry goes to his mom and hugs her and cries, and he gets his last moment with her, even though she doesn't know it's him, it's Barry from the future. And I just think they wrapped up his arc really well and gave him a lot of great development. He was learning how to deal with the loss, and despite being a superhero, some things he can't change, some problems he can't fix, is what his mom would always tell him. And yeah, it just was really heartfelt and really emotional, and I was surprised. It was probably one of the most emotional moments in a superhero movie that I can think of in recent years. Maybe besides Guardians, that was a real tearjerker, that movie. But this was, I mean, yeah, it really hit. It was sad. It was well done. It really made you care for Barry and his loss. So that was basically I mean, it's a pretty long plot summary, but after he realizes he can't change the past, he lets his mom go, he comes back to current time, and he basically figured out how to get his dad free. He moved the tomato sauce on the shelf so that his dad would look up at the camera to match his alibi that he was in the store, and his dad gets off free. And this is current day, and then Bruce Wayne calls the Flash, and he tells him he's coming to congratulate him. And this is where we get the, like, just the funniest reveal. George Clooney shows up. I had heard rumors that he was going to be in this movie, and I was really happy to see him. Basically, if you don't know, George Clooney is the Batman that had the bat nipples in his suit, and people just infamously hate on him. So it was really funny to see this cameo. And Barry's confused. He's like, "Where's Ben Affleck, Batman? Who are you?" And it was just a great way, a really comedic way to end the movie. While we're on the topic of cameos, there was a few others that I brushed over. You kind of get a glimpse at all the multiverses colliding when Barry is trying to decide what he should do, when he realizes he has to let his mom go. And the multiverses collide, and we get a look at all these like Superman, Batmans from other universes. So we get first, well, not in this order, but first we got Christopher Reeve, the OG Superman. Really cool to see him, and they recreated him in CGI because he's passed, unfortunately. And the OG Supergirl. That was really cool. Then there's Nicolas Cage as Superman, and the story behind this is really funny. There is pictures of him in the Superman suit, but there never was a Superman movie starring Nicolas Cage. It was planned to happen, but it never happened, and he was originally going to be the Superman in the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton universe. So it's cool to see him get his moment, even though it was CGI. A lot of these like cameos were all CGI. It was definitely like uncanny, and like they weren't super realistic, but it was cool nonetheless to see them show up. So I'm not gonna be too like harsh on this CGI, but it was very rough to look at, but just the moment kind of made up for it. And then some other cameos. Henry Cavill showed up in the Speed Force, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman. And then You also got Adam West, the OG Batman from the 60s. There also was a cameo from the OG black and white Superman played by George Reeves, and Jay Garrick, who's the like classic Flash. This was like, I think this was more a comic reference, although there might have been an actor that played him in the past. So you got all these cool classic cameos, even though they were CGI, still was really cool to see, and never gonna complain when you get some nice fan service in a movie like this. That basically brings us to the end of this movie. Barry Allen gets a very nice wrap up on his character. Great character development, which you haven't really seen too much from a lot of the recent superhero movies. It was emotional and it was very well balanced, and it had a clear, like I said, character development throughout the movie. He deals with the loss of his mom and learns how to cope with that, and he gets his happy ending as he gets a date with Iris West. And then finally we get to the post-credit scene where the Flash is dealing with a drunk Aquaman, played by Jason Momoa, and he's explaining that some characters in the multiverse or these timelines they look the same, they're played by the same actors, and some are different, like the Batmans are different. You have Michael Keaton compared to Ben Affleck and George Clooney, and this is kind of similar to like how in the Marvel multiverse all the Spider-Man look different, but then the Doctor Stranges all look the same. They're played by the same actor in the multiverse. Kind of weird, there's never really an explanation for it, but it works for the movies, like the movie companies, because they can just make up the rules as they go. But I think this is kind of like a hint or marketing tactic to get people to watch Aquaman, because people don't know if it's going to connect to the new DC movies or if it's part of the old ones, and people won't care if it's connected to the old stuff. So I think they're trying to keep Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and I think he does a good job. But I don't care either way too much. I'm not like super attached to him, but it was interesting to see this post-credit, what they're setting up. But I mean, it might just be setting up to nothing, as a lot of these DC post-credit scenes do, sadly. So here are my final thoughts on The Flash. Despite some rough CGI at times and controversial problems in real life, Ezra Miller did a great job in this movie, and I really enjoyed him as The Flash, despite him being a mess. And it's sad that he is such a problem in real life, because I think he would do a good job as the Flash going forward. Who knows what'll happen if they keep him? I can't imagine they will, but he did a good job, I can't lie. Very emotional and heartfelt, which I wasn't expecting, and it really did exceed my expectations. All the cameos and action was just great. Love how it kind of explored the past of the DCEU and gave closure to the fans of the old stuff, and also kept the door open in case they do keep some of the actors and storylines. And yeah, overall, I think you should go watch the movie. I think you'll enjoy it if you are a fan of the DCEU or Flash as a character. I thought it was very well done. It was still respectful to the comics, adapted basically a classic storyline, and I thought it did it really well. I guess my biggest problem would be it was more of a multiverse Justice League movie, but it's the Flash solo film. But it's kind of expected at this point from all the superhero movies. They love to bring in other characters, and I'm never going to complain, because it definitely makes it really interesting, and I don't know, I don't think you can have enough of a good thing, in my opinion.